Well, hello and welcome to I Love Energy Medicine. My name's Nick Hansinger. I'm the president of Energy Mastery, and
I'm Sheevaun Moran, and I'm the CEO and founder.
Well, we are super excited to be here. This is an exciting show today to talk about two of my very favorite things. Number one is relationships, and number two is money and how money plays into those relationships. So I'm excited to dive right into it, if that's okay with you. Sheevaun, are you ready?
Yeah, how much time do we got? Like, we could go on forever on this one.
Exactly. Nothing like choosing a big topic to go in here.
Yeah,
but it is kind of specific. So one of the things that we often talk about is energy on all of these main levels: physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, financially, and spiritually, and how all of those need together. So we talk about energy in relationships, and we talk about energy in finances. But one of the things that we don't always talk about is energy in relationship and in finances. And how does that work within the dynamics of that? So I'll give you a great example. And this is something that I've run into is, as many of you know, I speak with literally hundreds and hundreds of people about energy mastery and coming in or taking a step forward for them and helping them take that step forward.
Okay, so can I hang you up for a second and just be like, I want to unpack something first before we just get into the meat of it. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
Of course.
Super cool. So generally, I think people are just waking up, even though I've been doing this 20 years, to energy and money. They're just kind of waking up to that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. It's a conversation that I hear often, but there seems to be a lack of clarity around that conversation.
Exactly. And so we have the conversation around energy and money is energy, la la la. But people use that like as a little throwaway phrase. And the other thing that I hear a lot about is, well, how does my money affect my relationships? And how does my relationships affect my money? So they're kind of two big honking topics. And I think we should unpack just a little tiny bit before I know you're going to get into something that is so heartfelt and important for anybody who's doing this work. So money is energy, right? So I've heard over the past 20 years, we shouldn't have to have money. Everything should be free, right?
Yep.
And I came from corporate and business building and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is we should have some components of business that is of contribution, but we shouldn't have it as free because then there is no value placed on it. So that's why you see prices from, $1 to I don't know. I remember I was speaking at an event about 16 years ago, and the woman who was like a card reader, people paid her $16,000 for a reading. I was like, wow, is she any good? People were like, she's okay. But that meant to me that she had a really freaking good relationship with money and was just like, this is what I'm worth and this is what I'm charging, and people paid her. So, we have these things all across the board. And when I came from corporate, one of the last companies I helped grow into something big, they had this thing when I first came in was like, give them all free stuff and then they'll buy the stuff. Well, nobody bought stuff. And it was a pharmaceutical company. And I said, well, that's really cool, but let's create two prongs. And so we had an indigent patient program. That's what we called it. And that was for people who were in high need, and that made sense. And that was logical. And then, the other products that were for purchase. And then the business started thriving. So the woman who founded the business, and it was a woman, one of the first woman-owned CEOs of a pharmaceutical company. And so she had this idea that was upside down, just like many women tend to do, right?
Yes, very much so.
And, and she was a Harvard grad, so she should have known better. But it got all turned around. And so that's one piece. And there really has to be a good exchange for product and service. There has to be a good exchange of dollars. It happens to be dollars now. It used to be yaks and cheese and milk and cows and sheep. and chickens, right? So now it's turned into dollars because those things got a little big to carry around. So now we have these little paper things that are worth yaks and cheese and milk and, and stuff like that, right? But we don't really think of it in those terms. So our little selves get caught up in this thing around energy, and it's just like, oh, it's a different circumstance. And I decided when I first went into this, I was going to go to the doctor and just get a checkup. And I was like, I'm paying for this out of pocket. I want to see how much they charge me. And this is probably about maybe 17 years ago. And it was $285, and the doctor saw me for 15 minutes. And before that, if anybody has recalled my story, I got misdiagnosed by a doctor, got sick, and nearly died because of a doctor. So, that was pretty expensive in the long run. So people had a very wonky idea of it. And so I went to the doctor to check it out for myself. And it was $285. I was like, well, that's what I should charge. And that's what I did.
And that's how you determine what the value was. You're like, well, this is it, and this is just what it should be. And I think that's appropriate.
Exactly. So it wasn't about me asking permission to charge that. It was like, this is what the value is that a physician is doing. And I was getting far better rates of success than physicians in far shorter period of time. So, and that's what Energy Mastery is about. But, I know when you talk to people that people end up in funky circumstances around the value and conversations, and then they turn it all into something weird. And I want to just, after putting this together from my perspective, and I think helping everybody here have a little different perspective about money and energy and transference and, correcting of the exchange of money and energy and how they work together, and then we're going to play it into relationships. So, does that help you set up? Does that help set up the thing that you were going to go into, maybe?
Well, it does, yes, and it brings up a little bit of a tangent around that too, where yes, those things do come up, where it's like, well, there's an investment for an tuition for a program, and that whatever that is, and it's really what it is about value. And it's just a misunderstanding, I think, sometimes, because it's difficult for some people to conceive that they might never have to go see another doctor again.
Yeah. I mean, it cost me, that near-death experience probably cost me $12,000.
Oh, and that's actually pretty inexpensive by today's standards.
Yeah, and I'm only guessing. I don't remember the bills or anything, but that was my out-of-pocket piece, and I don't know what the hospital had to pay because I went to the emergency room and I stayed there for several hours, and that's pretty expensive.
Did you know that some people are taking Ubers to the emergency room?
Are you serious?
Because of the cost. I am. I was just reading an article about it the other day because I get these little pings and they show up in my feed sometimes. And
it's cheaper than oh my God.
Well, because of ambulance costs, they can run into the thousands.
Yes.
To get an ambulance to take you a few miles.
Oh my God.
And so they'll call an Uber. And the Uber drivers are having a tough time with that, the Uber and Lyft drivers, because they're like, well, I'm not qualified for this. Like, I don't want anybody, passing away in my car, and there's the whole thing. So, it's because those costs are just skyrocketing in so many weird ways. Like, who would think that an ambulance ride to go a couple miles would cost a couple $1,000s, but that's what it costs.
Wow.
And so they'll call an Uber before they'll do that. And so it really is an understanding of what's at stake and the ability to heal your own body, to solve ailments and things that come up, just to recover your own time and effort and energy, and to not lose time or downtime like that, where you would be, recovering from an illness or something of that sort, or something that kind of knocks you out, even for a few days here and there. It's just an annoyance at best, and can cost money in the long term, at worst. But then there's stress and anxiety and all those things that build up in ourselves and in our modern lives, and trying to do so many different things. Well, when you start to add that up, the cost of that really become astronomical in no time. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the prospect of being able to actually never have to visit another doctor again, to have the power in your own two hands to solve all of those challenges that come your way, to have a community around that will support you in that and help you to keep refining that so that you can do that more effectively. I mean, when you really look at what is there, then to me, it just becomes a very different conversation. And the actual value of that is truly off the charts.
Yeah. So it's like saying, okay, great. And well, we're not saying doctors are obsolete. We want to make them obsolete because they're important. Actually, if they all took our class, they would be far more exponentially better physicians, but that's for later.
Later.
And
2019.
What's that?
We'll launch that mission in 2019.
There you go. But the fact of the matter is that these things go hand in hand, and they don't have to take so much expense. They don't have to take so much time, and they don't have to take so much recovery. So it's like, okay, so maybe you do end up having to go to the doctor, but your recovery is like 100 times faster. See, even that in and of itself. Anyway, I went off on another tangent.
Yeah, but it's so easy because there is so much here to talk about, and but when we really look down at the financial exchange and understanding money as energy, that is really what we're talking about, is making sure that exchange is in place and really understanding the value. I think it was Hunter S. Thompson that said, people these days know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And sure, he's a little cynical in his way and his words, but he makes a very good point about really understanding what is value in our lives and what we're willing to invest in. And I can never think of a better investment of your time, effort, energy, and money than into yourself and being the most amazing human that you can be, which kind of brings us to the second portion of this, which is the dynamic of relationships. And having a partner. Well, I want to ask you a question first. This is something I hear a lot of questions around. Well, I want to attract a partner in my life where, this is not me speaking, but people asking me this question. They say, well, I want to attract a partner in my life where we're on the same track, and I don't always feel like the partners that I attract are supportive of my spiritual calling and these sorts of things, and they get frustrated with that. My first question right out of the box is, well, is that even important? Like, how important is that to have a partner that is supportive of those things?
It really is important that you have the same values, and it may not be the same spiritual values, but it may be and it may be not the same church or the same, the same way of meditation. It may not be exactly the same, but the same value system of wanting to do better for yourself, wanting to do better for the world, wanting to make sure the family's health is taken care of, wanting to be good to each other, wanting to, apply the law of increase rather than applying the law of holding back and decrease. And so it's more helpful if there's alignment in those values. But the rest, it kind of works itself out because the values are the most important thing. And the values are the most important thing because money is the thing that is the greatest cause of divorce, separation, and not staying together. And money is the greatest source of anger, animosity, violence, and control, manipulation. It just goes on and on. And, if one has more than another, it ends up being sticky. And so there has to be a really good value system, and there also has to be a level of respect on both parties. And when you find those two things, it doesn't have to be the exact same thing. It really just has to be the core of those. And when you get to the core of those, it really allows prosperity to show up in your growth, in your life, in your family, in your health, etc. But you also have to, if you're looking to attract these kind of folks into your world, then you have to clean up your crap. To be a little blunt.
Yeah. Yeah, and any of the judgment around the way that you think it's supposed to look. That's what I'm hearing from you, is that it really is about values, and if we get too attached to the way that shows up, particularly like, that's nice that you have a spiritual practice, but it's not my spiritual practice.
Exactly.
So I want you to have my spiritual practice. Like then it gets really sticky, and I think that.
And then you're going to be alone.
Yeah. Yeah, or you'll find somebody who is exactly like you, and there'll be no attraction.
Or you'll find somebody who's going to totally make you suppress it because they're not like you, or they're close to like you, or they've put on a mask that they are like you, and then it will end up being suppressed. And so right?
That's sneaky. It's sneaky. You're right, though.
Totally is. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that brings us to money in relationships. So dealing with the dynamics of the finances in relationships. And I've seen people do this all different kinds of ways, where they have everything's joint, everything's together. They put it all into one thing. I see people where everything's entirely separate, and you have mine and you have yours, and we both just deal with it in our own ways and come to some sort of agreement. And then everything in between of that. So is there a proper way in a relationship to manage the money, or is it unique to those individuals?
It really has to be a level of respect. So if you're afraid to do something because your partner is going to say no, or maybe you're blaming your partner in order to not make a mistake, which is I've seen a lot over the course of the many years. And it's an easy way out to be like, oh, no, they're not going to let me spend and la, la, la. But really, at the end of the day, a true good partner really just wants the highest and best for you. And then it's really about showing them how it is that it's that important to you. So off on a tangent, but back for a second, it's important that there is ability to have conversation. It's important to know that you are whatever step you're going to take is actually going to help you have more life and the ability to be of contribution in the long term. And a lot of people don't have that comfort, confidence, ease. There's so much fear around speaking with anybody about money, for goodness sake. That it's like, okay, so the partner's the easiest one to blame or even just get into a funky circumstance around, and it may not even be true. And I found that many, many times. I had this one client some time ago, and she had a dental practice, and she wanted to sell it, and she was going to sell it for like, I don't know, a fourth of what I went through her business and looked at everything, a fourth of what it needed to be. And she's like, oh, no, my husband this, my husband that, my husband this. I was like, okay, wait. So it took us a little while to unpack it. And she ended up selling it for the amount that I recommended. And she ended up consulting and recently just moved to Costa Rica. So it was all wound into the conversation and the story that she had around what her husband was going to say and do and how he was going to stop her. And once he understood what she wanted to achieve, he was like, rock and roll, let's go.
Well, that's really interesting. Now, what about in situations where it's not so easy to express that? So one of the things that I've heard a lot and certainly experienced is when I just know that something is right for me and I know I'm exactly where I need to be and there's a financial commitment in order to take that step. Well, if you're not able to really make that tangible or to put that into words or something that your partner can understand, well, what do you do with that?
I love that. I'll tell another story about a client who is an executive, and she became a stay-at-home mom at the insistence of her husband, by the way. And a stay-at-home mom before they had kids and they were having kids and, went through this whole thing. Anyway, so she ended up being a stay-at-home mom for not just one, but 3 kids. And the fascinating thing is she lost her ability to think about money in the same way. So she became like a servant to him because her own confidence around how to build her own income got basically cut. And it didn't get cut. It just needed to have an expression and a conversation. And it took her a while to really, really work through how to have that conversation. It all came from childhood stuff. And once we got through that, he was just, he was just on board with her taking action in each different step, each step of the way. And, a couple of years later, she has her own business. But it took a little time, and it also took the two of them coming into a conversation. So often one person will be like, no, they're going to say this, and they have this whole thing wrapped in their head as to what they're going to say. And it's like, oftentimes it's really not 100% the case. I mean, I've seen it like only be the case 1% of the time that they're going to say what their partner assumed they were going to say. Kind of fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because you think, well, that's the person that they know best in the world. Of course, they know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
But how much of that becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy,
which is an energy,
creating that,
and it just
creating that energy.
Yeah, and it slings back and forth between a couple and a relationship. And as soon as we clean up the energetics, and we teach people how to clean up the energetics, it's so amazing how much prosperity flows into both person's lives and the couple together's life. It's amazing. It astounds me every single time. I mean, we're really just talking about energy. How I came about this is a client of mine went, and I'd heard this pretty much early on, but I kind of discounted it. And a client of mine made me really listen to her story. And I'd worked on her, and she actually had this energy. It truly was an energy of, she thought she had cancer, and her husband was doing this, and she thought she was a loser mom. So she had 3 big things going on that were big problems. And she had a health challenge. Oh, wait, there was another one, if I'm thinking about it. Yeah, her therapist was horrible. So we unwound a whole bunch of this, and she said, after about 4 sessions, I have to make sure you understand. She told me this a couple months later. After about 4 sessions, there was some stuff that we had on the market that we were going to have foreclosed on, and they had been sitting on the market for 2 years, 0 people looking at them, 0 interest, 0 anything, and suddenly they sold as soon as you started working with me. And that's when I really paid attention to the money is energy, energy is money. And once we clean up one of the couple's energy, things just flow in ways that often I don't hear about till many years later.
They come back around and tell you, oh my gosh, this changed and that changed.
I just got an email. This is fascinating. I just got an email from somebody who took the course years ago and who then became a client. And she had this kind of idea about starting a business, and she had all kinds of things that were going on in her head around it, and her energy was a wreck. I mean, a true wreck. Anxiety, tension, like you name it, she'd gotten it. And she could barely eat stuff. It was just a wreck. And we turned all that around. Now she actually has a thriving business that is in most of the school districts across the United States. I didn't know that. I did not know that until this email.
Oh my goodness. They hide out with all these amazing
I
things.
know, right?
It's so funny. Yeah. So really it's about in money, it's really about the value that we create, and then in relationship it's sharing those values and having respect for one another, and cleaning, and most importantly is cleaning up the energy so that there can be a much easier exchange of information and of ideas, and that are really centered on taking that person towards their highest and their best, and to do that with as much ease as possible. That's what I'm hearing. Did I miss anything there?
Yeah, and turning that story that you have in your head around, turning that conversation you have in your head around to be like, maybe this isn't true. Maybe they actually have something higher in mind for me that I don't even know, or that, I mean, it's really, we have our own thoughts and ideas, and we keep them secret, and and they're usually not very pretty, and we then put that on somebody else. And the fact of the matter is, where there's a will, there's a way. If your soul calls for it, it's already there. I mean, that's the law of the universe. If your soul calls for you to take action on something, to invest in something, whatever that is, okay, not a 52-inch TV, that's not a soul's calling.
Fair enough.
Not a pair of Fendi shoes. That's not a soul's calling. Maybe for some, okay. But still, there are things about being a better human and doing the good things on the planet and knowing that there's something for you that is, and then it's really just about, it is already within your scope and in your field of life that you live every day, day in and day out. That dollar amount is already there waiting for you. Whether you can see it or allow yourself to see it is another thing.
Well, Sheevaun, thank you for unpacking this conversation. You know, I think one of the interesting things that we do here at I Love Energy Medicine is sure, we could talk about the esoterics, and that's all really interesting, and we will definitely talk more about those things, and they're awesome. But what about how we express that in the world? And that's where this really interesting conversation about energy and money and the true spirituality behind that, and certainly energy and relationships and how all those dynamics work together, like that's where the rubber meets the road for your life. And getting those pieces to work, I would argue, is just as important as making sure that you have that connection to your highest as well, to make sure that they all work together.
Yeah.
So,
amen.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for letting us unpack that and really bring some of this to light so that we could have this conversation. So for all of you out there who are listening, thanks for checking it out. If there was value in this for you, and maybe you know somebody who needs, maybe you've been trying to tell them and they just need to hear it in a little bit of a different voice, go ahead and share our episode. You can certainly look for a next step. If you want to come in and have a conversation, you can do that at iloveenergymedicine.com. You'll find a link there in order to take that next step for yourself and to set up a conversation. But Sheevaun, thank you so much for this episode, and look forward to seeing everybody in the next one. Namaste.
Namaste.